Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
Back alongside Bo Parrish, I'm Dave Erickson, and today we are talking about the lost art of kindness. And you know, you've heard that phrase in business, most likely, is that nice guys finish last. But you, Bo, are talking about the long-term benefits of being kind and how you can practice that on a regular basis.
No question, Dave, and it's wonderful to be with you again. And just on the general topic of kindness, I think it is a lost art. You know, I think it gets lost in the noise of hustle and bustle and doing whatever it takes to get to the finish line first, to one up, to compete, to do whatever it takes to put ourselves in a more favorable position, even at the expense of our coworkers, of our friends, and our families. And just because you are kind, and before we go further, I don't think we use that word kindness a whole lot. You know, I think it often masquerades as sincerity, as generosity. We don't come out right and just use the word, oh, you're so kind. You know, perhaps it's cool, or that was generous, you're gracious, gosh, I really appreciate the hospitality. But when it comes to kindness, you know, as we progress in our endurance alphabet, coming up with an appropriate word that started with K, well, kindness has actually been around since the very beginning of time. You think about Adam and Eve being created by God, put it in the Garden of Eden, were given free rein to rule amongst their territory, and were provided with everything that they could possibly desire. That was an initial extension of God's kindness, and it's been around ever since. As a matter of fact, the human race would not have continued if it weren't for kindness, because ultimately, at the root of kindness is a genuine care and concern for those that we are immediately surrounded with. And so I would like to take a minute, again, before we continue, just to extend the kindness that you now know from me as a 5-year-old friend as being sincere, is that your performance on Sunday at Ironman Coeur d'Alene, when the record temperatures reached 105 degrees, not only is that unheard of in the Pacific Northwest United States, but I think it's the hottest Ironman Coeur d'Alene on record. And it could be one of the hottest of all times. And so you and I were discussing prior to going into the race, your overall training and prep leading up to it. You weren't necessarily as motivated this time around, but at the same time, you felt obligated to compete on behalf of your benefactors. And so you got out there, you had a very respectable swim, you had a great bike, you hit your wattage exactly how you wanted to. And although your feet were soaked due to your constant drenching with water as a cooling tactic, which, by the way, everyone, you definitely need to check out Dave's other podcast that he does weekly with Roger Thompson on different options of staying cool in extreme heat. I personally got a lot of mileage out of it. And then by the time you started the run, you were right on track with where you wanted to be. And of course, in order to survive, which you were primarily using your heart rate of, you needed to slow your pace down. And you ultimately finished amidst a field that experienced an attrition rate of close to 25%. So yeah, Dave, you weren't thrilled with your overall time, but you finished. And as an act of overcoming, of perseverance, and extreme endurance, you finished your 5th Ironman race, your 5th 2.4 mile swim, your 5th 112 mile bike, and your 5th 26.2 mile run. So kudos to you, brother. From the bottom of my heart, that is the kindness that I can extend to you. Now, you and I have the benefit of a friendship that was not created overnight. If I were to just come out and shower you with that praise, it might tend to sound a little superficial, as fake, as hype. But you know me as one who has a sincere care and concern for your overall well-being as a person. And that kindness translates easily for you to pick up on, so as you know that it's coming from a stance of sincerity rather than superficiality. So when it comes to kindness in general, practicing it on a daily basis, what are some methods that we can pursue, at least to remain conscious of the overall value of kindness? Well, we know that we live in a world that's characterized by cutthroat competition. In other words, we always have to have our guards up. We have to constantly watch our backs, or else we could get taken advantage of. It happens in the office, it happens at home, it happens out amongst the community. And it's very unfortunate, but it's real. And naturally, that's going to allow us to tend towards more of the skeptical nature, to think about plotting strategies, not how to benefit those around us, but how to benefit ourselves, because we're all selfish by nature, and that doesn't necessarily set itself up to practice kindness. And so, Dave, the way that I particularly take inventory of the value of kindness is that every single day when I am in public, when I'm amongst other people, I try to pick at least one person with which to extend a hand, a helping hand, in the sense that, like today, I was in the grocery store and there was a little old lady in the vegetable section after I'd gotten some broccoli, and she looked at me and she said, "Sir, what exactly do you know if that's organic or not?" And I was like, "Ma'am, I don't think it is. But I can show you where the organic broccoli is." And I kind of pointed across the way, and she said, "Oh, thank you very much." Well, I could have just ignored her and kept going about my business, but it's, hey, let me stop for a second and try to think from a perspective other than my own. Because at the end of the day, I'm not the only person on the face of the earth at any given moment. There are other things that are happening that are much bigger, and I would actually say more valuable or important than whatever my agenda is in the moment at this particular time. And so just because I stop my own pursuit on my path for a moment, and I actually take interest in what's going on around me, and again, it can just be one person, and simply asking one question: how are you today? And listen for the response. Don't just go about your business as a habit, as a practice, as a common courtesy. Because if you're not willing to actually carry through on what you offer, in other words, can I help? Then don't offer it at all, because that's not kindness. That's superficiality, and it's fake. It's not going to get you anywhere. So kindness is a matter of focus. What is it that's going on outside of your immediate surroundings? And what is it that you can learn about those who you are coexisting with that you could potentially make their day better? Who knows?
In life, though, we do want a little something in return. We can't completely be unselfish. We are looking for, hopefully, some sort of reciprocation in that kindness. Maybe whether it's not directly, maybe that person will be kind to somebody else. I mean, I can see this as being a habit in life, but I'd also caution people to be somewhat suspicious of those out there who are practicing the superficiality of kindness. And I'm not sure if this is a good example exactly, but I know we have somewhat of a homeless problem here at certain intersections on the highway or certain places in the valley. And as a former reporter, I've done stories on the homeless who are scamming, or they're using the donations for, negative things, or for a very unhealthy lifestyle. So we have to be suspicious in some respects of who's out there who's genuinely needing help, and then also the depth of which our kindness will be. Am I going down the right path here?
Well, so obviously you want to avoid erring on the side of naivety, which I tend to do more than not. Fortunately, I'm married to a wonderful lady who compliments me perfectly, because whereas I assume innocence before guilt, she assumes guilt before innocence. And I have been taken advantage. And we too in Nashville have a problem with the homeless. And there's one particular kid that stands on the same corner every single day. Matter of fact, I've gone so far, his name is Eric. He has a 2-year-old son. Obviously, they all have wonderful stories to tell. Well, it just so happens that we have a program in Nashville that the mayor set up, and it's called the Homeless Paper. They have to register, they have official badges, and then they buy a paper that's manufactured or printed every single day for $1 a piece, and then they sell it at their own price. And so it is somewhat of an entrepreneurial venture, and they're everywhere. But this kid, Eric, hadn't even taken that step. Matter of fact, he was holding a cardboard sign that said homeless in need of help. And so it broke my heart to see him there day after day after day. And so finally one day I stopped and I got out of my car and I approached him and I said, "Tell me what's going on." And from there he proceeded to tell me his situation. His mother had gotten arrested. He'd been displaced from his apartment. Girlfriend was pregnant, 2-year-old son. He can't find work because he doesn't have an ID. He's applied for a state registered ID. It hadn't come to him. He doesn't have a mailing address. So I ended up paying for a week in a hotel and food. And he assured me that once he got his license or his ID, that he had 2 to 3 job offers in place that were just waiting on that ID. One was with a construction crew, one was with a landscaping company, and another one was actually with a local retailer. So that was enough for me. And I said, absolutely. We all have our run of bad luck. We all need second chances, and third and fourth and fifth and sixth for that matter. And so we ended up building that relationship, because I'm of the belief that relationships serve as the foundation for recovery. He knew that I cared about his situation, and making that effort to learn rather than just assume that he was a bum or a drug addict or just a screw up, is that I took that effort and I got to know him. And unfortunately, Dave, after all of that experience, he's still out there doing the exact same thing. And so the intentions are good. But in the end, as we previously discussed, intentions are meaningless if you're not fully intent on acting on what it is you're hoping to improve. And so if I had it to do over again, I probably would, because that's a core belief of mine, and that the ability to be kind to someone, if it presents itself, you should do it 100% of the time, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, without expecting anything in return. And yes, I know that's a bit extreme. I know that's a little controversial, but ultimately in the end, paying that kindness to your fellow human being is going to eventually put you in a favorable position down the road. The gratification is not going to be immediate, but that should not deter you from wanting to extend that kindness over and over and over again. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but that's just kind of my personal take on just the incredible value of kindness.
No, I like this story. I like to hear that point of view. It also gives people an insight to who you are outside of the business world, or these, you're helping people on their path. That's a nice insight. You know, there's a phrase, and I'll see if I get this phrase right. It was by Dennis Waitley, Dr. Dennis Waitley, Psychology of Winning, a series that I heard back in my high school days. I'd listened to these tapes over and over again, and one of them was plant a shade tree for which you know you'll never sit. You know, giving of yourself, even though you may not benefit in the future. And that sounds like one of these kindness examples, that it is something that you give of yourself that you know for sure you will not benefit from. So I'm going to plant that shade tree. I'm going to move on. And that's one of those things, like you're hoping you have the best intentions, or you have the best intent. If it works out great, you don't even know. But that's your nature. And I think that type of nature is what we want to strive for as human beings, is to helping someone out of the genuine nature of our heart.
Well, absolutely, Dave. I'm thrilled that you used that word nature, because built inside of all of us as human beings is the ongoing battle between nature and nurture. And unfortunately, our nature as human beings born into this world is self-centeredness. That's how we all come into the world. And the perfect picture of that is a baby screaming at the top of its lungs, as I've heard more of than not over the last 3 weeks, as opposed to a baby coming out saying, "Hello, mother, what can I do to help you?" Well, that's just not in our nature. So on the flip side of that is nurture, is that we have to work. We have to make a conscious effort to extend before we expect. Extending of ourselves before we expect of others. Maslow's hierarchy of needs states that our primary needs have to do with survival, food, clothing, and shelter. But then a very close second is our need for acceptance, a sense of belonging. So other than having that feeling of ourselves, how do we create that environment where those who are around us, who coexist, feel accepted by us? Well, we extend a genuine sense of kindness. We make them feel at ease. We nurture. We fight our nature in an effort to nurture. So it's that whole battle that's going on inside of us of nature versus nurture. And we see it played out every single day. And it just gets more and more sophisticated in the business world. But its foundation was found in survival of the fittest, evolution. You know, those animals that were faster, that were stronger, those are the ones that survived. And now in this world that we live in, those with the best ideas and the immediate ability to capitalize are the ones that are rewarded. Well, once that reward comes, it's a matter of what you do with the reward that has everything to do with kindness continuing to survive in this dog-eat-dog world. Kindness is truly an anomaly. It's an exception. It's noted, whereas self-centered, superficiality, unsincere focus, or unsincere kindness, because ultimately, and we can just look at this in the case of, we see a new season of election coming up. You know, in 2016, these candidates coming online making empty promises that they know they can't fulfill, but it sounds good. And they want to position themselves as a potential savior when they know they really don't have the power to do anything. But that type of kindness, I think, is going to be harder to sustain long term than finding one person every single day in your community, stopping, asking them a question that gives you insight into what's currently going through their mind. And based on what you hear, offer an extension of kindness in some form, shape, or fashion.
Now, if we continue with a couple more minutes left here, continue on with maybe the homeless person asking for donations or for money for that short-term gain. And what we're talking about with kindness is a depth, extending before you expect. Now, with someone like that, you want a long-term impact on someone like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Dave, we've heard the age-old principle, and I think there's so much truth in it, is that if you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he will eat forever. Now, I just so happen to feel that educators, teachers, professors, Sunday school teachers are the most honorable human beings in the face of the earth because they are in a position to extend the greatest amount of kindness because their entire role is outside of their own well-being. It's they are taking a set of skills, of knowledge that they've acquired over the year, and they are committing themselves to teaching others how to do that. So it's not a matter of giving, but it's a matter of perpetual giving through education. And so that role of the teacher ultimately is the greatest picture of kindness that I can imagine.
Well, I think today has been a great lesson on the value of kindness, and maybe that nice guys don't finish. Maybe they do finish first and not necessarily last. It just takes a while before we get to that finish line. As exampled by my race over the weekend, it took a little longer, but I did finish. And I think by having that kindness in your heart with depth, that we can all win in the long term.
Absolutely. And Dave, once again, huge congratulations and appropriately kudos with a K on your performance on Sunday. And just to conclude our time together, I would actually encourage our audience who is cutthroat, who is competitive by nature, is that you don't have to give up on this whole killing concept. But hey, at the very least, kill them with kindness. Over and out, my friend.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.